consultant Megan Hutson. Today we're going to be looking at the parent-led textbook kit for the third edition of Heritage Studies 4. We're going to take a look inside of the teacher edition, the student textbook, the student activity manual, and the activity manual answer key. So let's take a look inside these books. This is the teacher's edition for Heritage Studies 4. Heritage Studies 4 is a year-long course with 173 lessons. The book is split into 18 chapters. And as we flip through the front part of this book, you'll see there's a lot of information here. This is all great information to read through before you begin teaching this course. And we're going to talk about a little bit of it today as we look at some example lessons. I want to point out this lesson plan overview page. There's a page like this for every single chapter in this book. And today we're going to be looking at chapter 3. So let's look at the chapter 3, the Wild West lesson plan overview page. I can quickly see which lesson numbers I'm going to be on, which pages I'm going to be looking at in the teacher edition, which pages I'm assigning out of the student textbook, and which pages I'm assigning out of the student activity manual. I also have objectives for each of those lessons. So when I am planning out my lessons for the week, these are the pages I like to come to because I can quickly reference the student textbook pages and the activity manual pages, and I can have an idea of what we're going to be talking about that week in school. So like I said, there is a page like this for every single chapter. And I also wanted to point out that starting in chapter 12, you might notice topics like the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, the Southwest, and then the Rocky Mountain states and the Pacific states. This book's going to give you an overview of all the states in the USA. So a lot of people will ask me, when are we going to do state history? Well, Heritage Studies 4 is going to start incorporating some of that information about different states, and this is a great opportunity for you to bring in a lot of your state history if you can find specific information about your state. So I'm from Texas, so I would be pulling in information about Texas to add into our lessons so that we can talk more about Texas state history. So you can do the same thing in this book, and you can bring in more information about the state you're living in. I'm going to jump now to chapter 3, the Wild West. And every single chapter is going to start with an overview like this. It's similar to those lesson plan overviews we saw a second ago, but now we are also adding in our vocabulary words for this chapter. You may notice these two pages right here are actually the student textbook pages, so they are embedded into our teacher edition book. This book also gives me some suggestions for Journey Forth books that we could read during this chapter, and they're somehow related. Maybe it's the time period, there's something similar in these books, or maybe there's a character value that we're talking about in the chapter and it would be re-emphasized in these Journey Forth books. So these are just suggestions of books that you could pull in for extra reading during this chapter 3. We're going to look at lesson number 18. Up here at the top, I see which pages I'm assigning out of my student textbook and my activity manual. I also have my lesson focus and my objectives. I see a note here about the Teacher Toolkit CD. This CD is attached to the back of this teacher edition book, and it tells me that I would need the instructional aid 7, so I would want to pull that up before I begin teaching this lesson. Then I see that I have an introduction and a preparation for reading. These are questions I want to start asking my child before they read the pages in the book. This is going to get them thinking about what we're going to learn about in this chapter. It's going to get them thinking about the main idea. So then as they begin reading, they're going to have an understanding to start learning about this new information. The next part I see is called Teach for Understanding, and this is going to continue on to the next page. These are questions that I could ask after they're done with the reading to make sure that they've understood what they read. And I don't have to ask every single question. I am also free to add as many more questions as I want. I use these questions as a guide to help direct the conversation and to make sure that we're staying focused on what the day's main ideas were. If you do notice, these questions are in blue. and then the answers are in red. So you do have an idea of what the student read about and what they should be giving you as an answer or a response to the questions that you're asking. This lesson continues on for these 2 pages, and you may notice down here that there's some background information. This is information I would want to read before I begin the lesson, and I might want to incorporate it into the discussion that we're having as I'm asking questions. We also have activities. These activities are optional, but they are great enrichment activities to help promote understanding of the lesson and make sure that your student is engaged and not just doing book work, but actually having hands-on experiences as they are working. So in today's lesson, one of the activities is actually to talk about the Transcontinental Railroad, and they need to show a presentation of the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. I'm going to keep going. I keep saying that this 18 is still up here at the top, so I know I haven't finished my lesson. So these 2 pages would also be included in their reading for the day. And then I have some more information, background, and activities. This activity is talking about providing several Utah state quarters for students to examine, and then point out the imprint of the golden spike on the back of each coin. Because remember, again, we're talking about the Transcontinental Railroad today. So they're going to be talking about that golden spike. I also notice on this page that I have this question right here. This question is built into the student textbook, and these are questions that I would ask my child to answer before coming back and saying that we're ready to go over the lesson, because that's going to make sure he understood what he read during the lesson for the day. So I would continue with all my Teach for Understanding questions and guiding the discussion until we finished. I know I'm done when I see that activity manual page, and that tells me I've reached the end of the lesson. And I could also verify that by turning the page, and now I see that the 19 is there, so we're done with lesson 18. So that's a typical day for Heritage Studies 4. I'm going to go ahead and flip now towards the back where we find the appendix. The appendix has several things in here for us: Bible action truths, Bible promises, a section on explaining the gospel, and then a student text index and the teacher's edition index. And then we have the teacher toolkit CD. So let's talk a little bit about the Bible action truths and the Bible promises. Sometimes throughout your book, you'll find words that maybe you want to talk a little bit more about, or concepts you want to talk a little bit more about, biblical concepts or biblical words. Well, these words are often in these Bible action truths and Bible promises section, and they list Bible verses that you can look up, and then it has a brief description, and that would help guide you in a discussion about what the Bible says about these topics. And then we've got the explaining the gospel section, and we have the index. I'm going to show you the back of the book now. This is the teacher toolkit CD. It is attached to the back of your teacher's edition book. On this CD, you would find the activity manual answer key. You would find more background information, all of your instructional aids, primary resources, a materials list, rubrics. If you had an assignment that needed a special grading rubric, those would be on this teacher toolkit. You also have visual aids, so if there was a picture that you were needing to show that day for a lesson, it would be on this teacher toolkit for you. It's also got information about states, there's state cards, and there's also interactive visuals as well. So this is all included on your teacher edition toolkit CD. And that is the end of the Heritage Studies 4 Teacher Edition textbook. This is the Heritage Studies 4 student textbook. This front cover is smaller than a sheet of paper, and the book is about an inch thick. I'm going to flip the book open to chapter 3, which is what we were looking at in the Teacher Edition book a few moments ago. Each chapter does start with a timeline, so as we add events throughout the chapter, we can reference back to the timeline to see when in history they occurred. As I flip through the book, you may notice how many pictures and maps are mixed in to many of the pages in this book. You might also notice that there are quite a few bold words mixed in. Those are our vocabulary words. They also might be places or people's names. These are some of the main things that we want to learn about in each chapter. We also have these questions built in every couple pages. These are the questions that your children can ask after they are done reading their pages to make sure they understood what they read about. We also have an activity built into most of the chapters in this book. This activity is a great way for us to practice what we have learned or to make it go from book learning to hands-on learning. This will make it more memorable for our kids. So these are usually activities we want to try to make sure we do because they're going to help us reinforce the main concepts within each of the chapters. And then I've reached the end of chapter 4. Now, if you remember, this is actually going to start us out in chapter 12, going through the states of the United States. And I'm from Texas, so I'm going to jump to chapter 15, which is about the Southwest. And my first map shows me that the Southwest region is Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. I see this beautiful picture of the Alamo. I see plants, and I see wildlife that would be in the Southwest region. Each one of these chapters has a table like this that would talk about the state tree, state flower, state bird. We could also have a map here about the resources and products in the Southwest, so my child would be able to see, oh look, Texas, we have a lot of cattle, which we do. We have lots of longhorn. We also have a lot of oil, especially out in the west. On the east side of Texas, we have a lot of trees and forests. So these are some of the pages that you would have throughout each of these sections with the states. This is when I would be bringing in more information about my state with my child. We could get information from the library. We could write to our state capital and ask if they could send us any brochures. And this would be a great way to learn some of our state history. The last thing I want to show you in this book is our resource treasury. In this book, there are actually several different maps of the world, of the U.S., our geogloss, so we remember what all the different parts of landscaping is. So we've got mountains, we've got rivers, valleys, bays. So this is a great way to help our map skills. We also have our gazetteer, which is a geographical dictionary or glossary. And we have the biographical dictionary. And we even have a glossary at the end of this book. So lots of resources in the back of the student textbook. This is the Heritage Studies 4 Activity Manual. So this is the book where my child would be filling in information and practicing what they are learning about in each chapter. I've started at chapter 3, so you can see some of the pages that would have gone with the chapter 3 student textbook pages that we just flipped through. I love how at the bottom of the pages, it will tell you which lesson I'm working with and which pages in the textbook to look at. If you can't remember something or if your child can't remember something, it's nice that you can say, hey, go look back at these pages and then find that information and fill it in, because this is a great study skill to be able to have. It also tells me what type of activity this is. So this would be a chapter review. This one says that it's an expansion. I believe this is the first page of the 4th chapter. And then this one says writing skill. This one over here said reinforcement. So just all sorts of different activities to help reinforce the information that they're learning about in the lesson and in the student textbook. So that is the Heritage Studies 4 Student Activity Manual. And to go along with the Student Activity Manual is our Heritage Studies 4 Activity Manual answer key. So this book does not have any instruction in it. It's purely the answer key for those activity manual pages. This is a quick way for me to go and look to make sure that my child is answering the questions, and it saves me quite a bit of time, especially if you have multiple children. You can just go quickly check answers and make sure that they are understanding that day's lesson. So that is the Heritage Studies 4 Activity Manual Answer Key. The last thing I'm going to show you today is called Timeline Snapshots. This is not something that comes with your parent-led textbook kit. It is an add-on. It does coordinate with your Heritage Studies 2 through Heritage Studies 5, so you can reuse it each year as you are doing your lessons in school. All of the pieces are printed on cardstock, so it will also last a while. We really enjoy getting to use these timeline snapshots in our lessons because we can see when events and presidents line up in history. So let me show you how this kit would come. The first thing you would find is your timeline pieces. Now you would have to cut these apart, and then you would be able to line them up on your wall and put them together in order. You will also get many different events that you would be able to cut apart as needed, and then you could add those to your timeline. The last event on this card is President Obama's inauguration. You would also be getting a card that has all of the presidents up through President Obama, and it will show you their terms in office. This card also does come with a key to show you which political party each president was with. And what I would do is just cut apart the entire strip, and then I would be able to line that up on my timeline. So let me show you how these pieces would line up. Maybe in school we've been talking about the Boston Tea Party. So we would cut out the Boston Tea Party square and we would add it to our timeline. Maybe we have also started talking about signing the Declaration of Independence. So I could cut that out and add it to our timeline. And then we might talk about the signing of the Constitution. I could also add that to my timeline. At some point, we do end up with enough pieces on our timeline that we might need to stack on top of each other. So I would also be talking about my Bill of Rights, maybe. I could add that to my timeline up there. So I would be able to line up all of my events using these arrows to point to the spot on the timeline. I also have those president cards. Those go at the bottom of the timeline. I would easily be able to see how long a president was in office. And then remember, those colors represent different political parties. So this is the timeline snapshots. Again, this coordinates with your Heritage Studies 2 through 5. It is all printed on cardstock. You could reuse it each year. You could even leave it up and just add events as you go through those new events in your Heritage Studies lessons, or you could take everything down and start afresh every year. So this is Timeline Snapshots. Thanks for joining me as we look through those books. The only thing that comes in the test book kit that I didn't show you today is the Heritage Studies 4 test packet and the test answer key packet. Inside of the test packet, you will find a chapter test for every chapter in Heritage Studies 4. So it's a quick way to make sure that your child understands all the material that was covered in those Heritage Studies 4 chapters. If you have any questions about Heritage Studies 4, please feel free to reach out to your local Homeworks by Precept consultant. We would love to answer your questions. And I hope you have a great day.